Okay, so as far as generic classes are concerned, the concept is similar as the one in functions. So let's go ahead and create our generic class, which I have in my infinite wisdom named dummy generic. Template, type name, type, and down below we'll type in class dummy generic. Okay. Generic. And we shall go ahead and do something fairly strange here. Type attribute. So this will basically create an attribute of type, you guessed it, type. So it's once again, it's creating an attribute of type type. That's literally the name of it. Okay, so let's go ahead and type in public. And no, that's not how I want it to be. I know that CodeBlocks wants it to be like that, but no, just no. Dummy generic. So we're going to go ahead and create ourselves a constructor here. Type param and we're going to initialize attribute to param. So whatever is passed here as a parameter, as long as it fits, its attribute shall be initialized to that value. Okay, we're gonna leave that empty. I mean, constructor logic would go here as before, but for the time being, just gonna go ahead and leave it empty. There's really no need to put anything in it for demo purposes. And down below, I shall type in type get attribute. This will not change anything, so I shall put it as const. And it's going to be return this attribute. Okay. Yep, I'm missing something. So return this minus sign, greater than sign, and attribute. So this will basically return the attribute from the one that we've defined previously. If you haven't managed to conclude thus far, this is a getter function. It is a getter function which has a return type and it's going to return attribute to us when it is called. It's a method. I keep interchanging between functions and methods, pretty much the same thing, except functions which are within classes, they're called methods. That's pretty much it. So don't get confused by that. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a setter. I should probably do this for aesthetic reasons. Void set attribute type A. Just mind the capitalization of letters. C++ is extremely case sensitive. Attribute equals A. So this will be the setter because this variable is out in private and we will get it and set it through the usage of public methods. And I'm gonna go ahead and of course remove this. Yes, today please. I knew I would overdo it. And then down below in the main, we can, with fair amount of certainty, delete this, knowing that we won't be using that thing again. And to instantiate a generic class here within main, it is necessary to specify the type with which we want to instantiate it within these angle brackets. So I shall type in dummy generic, and this shall be int. Okay, so hey, we need an int. Dummy int, and we shall place 10 here. So type shall be int, and I'll create a few more down the line just for the demo purposes. Okay, so let's do another one, and let's do another one, and this one shall be a char, so E, and this one shall be a double, yeah, sure, why not? Let's put it as a double, 10.99, and this one shall be an integer. Now we need to change them here as well. So here I will have double, and here I shall have char. And down below, I will also do this. So dummy underline char dot set attribute p. There we go. So what did we do here? What is the purpose of all of this? Why is it called generic? Well, I think you can figure it out by now. Look, it says type name, type, and then you have that it says here dummy generic. That means nothing. That's just an arbitrary name of the class. And then you have attribute, which is of type type. Like, what on earth is type type? Well, that's why it's called generic. As you can see, you can pass to this constructor pretty much anything that you want. Well, take that with a grain of salt, of course, but you are able to generically pass a parameter which does not need to be predefined here. So in a way, so you don't need to specify that this is going to be a double or an integer or a char. Rather, instead, you can specify that when the instantiation occurs. So dummy generic, and I've specified the type is int, and then I've basically utilized this constructor in order to initialize attribute to that particular value. So now the attribute will have the value of 10 and it will be an integer. So let's just go ahead, build and run this. And of course, there seems to be an error somewhere, probably a spelling error of some sort. Right. I've neglected to actually modify these as well. They don't need to be called dummy int, dummy double, etc. That's just that's arbitrary char, but for the sake of referencing, it's easier like this. So let's do this one more time. And there you go. It actually does work without any problems of whatsoever. So now when I type in dummy underline char, the set attribute will actually set this variable with the value of e, meaning that it will be a char. If I were to call dummy double, and if I were to utilize the set attribute method, I would initialize the attribute to a 10.99, etc. So the type doesn't need to be specified beforehand. In whether it's an int, it's a double, it's a char, etc. You can put pretty much whatever type you need here, and then use it as it goes. You can instantiate a class to whatever type you actually require along the way in the code, as opposed to what we have done with the class date, where we know the types. It's int day, it's int month, and it's int year, and it can only be int and it can be nothing else unless we actually modify the code. Whereas here in a generic class, it doesn't need to be attribute, doesn't need to be an integer, doesn't need to be a double, doesn't need to be a char. All of that can actually be specified later upon actually accessing the private attributes of a class upon the instantiation, which is a very useful concept in programming. And believe me, if you continue to practice C++, if you do something with C++, this will come extremely in handy. Because hey, just imagine you're doing something and you realize, oh man, I need a char here instead of an int. What are you gonna do? Go back and rewrite the class? Not a good idea. I mean, you're gonna, aside from the fact that you will lose a ton load of time, it is questionable when you rewrite it whether that class will function with the rest of the code down below. So not only would you need to rewrite the class, you would need to rewrite the rest of the code in order to fit it. Like this, you have a generic form into which you can plug pretty much whatever type you want. Okay, so that would be it. We're gonna go ahead and call the chapter here, and we're gonna jump into the next chapter in the follow-up tutorial, that is.